Behind the glamorous facade of old Hollywood, some of its brightest stars battled dark and destructive addictions. From substance abuse to binge drinking, these 15 actors spiraled into infamy and excess, leaving behind tales of tragedy and shattered dreams.
So long now, you filled my life. Like a great noise that I hear everywhere in my house.
Number 15, Richard Burton. Richard Burton, one of the most legendary figures in Hollywood post-World War II, is arguably one of the most paradoxical figures in the industry. His life was a blend of immense talent and tragic self-destruction unlike any other. Most famous for his turbulent personal life with Elizabeth Taylor, whom he married twice, Richard Burton was also an outstanding stage and voice actor. Born Richard Walter Jenkins in 1925 into a Welsh-speaking family, Burton's early life was marked by hardship. His mother died when he was just 2 years old, and his alcoholic father soon abandoned the family. However, in spite of these challenges, Burton's passion for literature and Shakespearean works led him to Oxford University, and it was there that one of his teachers nudged him in the direction of acting. His acting career took off with roles in British films like Women of Dulwyn and Waterfront Women, but it was his transition to Hollywood that truly saw him grow into a star. Who could forget some of his critically acclaimed works like My Cousin Rachel, The Robe, and 1956's Alexander the Great? He dominated the industry at his peak up until the late 1960s, when his appeal began to wane as newer, younger actors took the spotlight. Still, he delivered powerful performances in films like Anne of the Thousand Days and Equus, for which he earned another Oscar nomination. Alas, for all of his stage success, Burton's personal life was far more turbulent. Raised in a culture of heavy drinking, as his father was known to consume 12 pints a day, Burton began smoking at the age of 8 and was pretty much addicted by the time he was 12. His drinking habits were the stuff of legend. He would drink all day long, starting with vodka and tonic in the morning and ending the day with several bottles of vodka or whiskey. In fact, his alcohol consumption was so severe that back in his Oxford days, he made a habit of gobbling up a yard of beer in only 12 seconds. He loved booze so much that he once boasted about his ability to drink half a gallon of cognac or vodka and still maintain his composure on stage. And no, he wasn't lying. Talking about Burton's lifestyle, a bartender at Le Grand Hotel in Rome once opened up about a particularly heated conversation between Burton and his wife, Taylor, that escalated into a fight. She was said to have hit him multiple times with roses, while Burton held his martini throughout without spilling a drop. Alas, his excessive drinking came at a steep cost. By the 1970s, Burton's health was in sharp decline. He suffered from cirrhosis of the liver, and his kidneys were severely damaged. During a surgery in the early 1980s, doctors discovered that his spine was covered with crystallized alcohol, a clear indication of the damage he had inflicted on his body over the years. By 57, he was dead. His body was severely weakened by his vices. Although the official cause of death was a cerebral hemorrhage, there's little doubt that if he stopped drinking and lived a healthier life, he would have died much older and happier. But hey, if you think Burton's life was a sad one, wait until you find out who's next. She suffered from schizophrenia and manic depression and eventually died alone, not even celebrated by those who worked closest to her. Number 14, Veronica Lake. Born with the name Constance Keena in 1922, the next on our list was a Hollywood icon whose beauty and distinctive style were simply out of this world. One of the most recognizable faces of the 1940s, Veronica Lake was heads and shoulders above her competition in her prime. The name Veronica Lake was christened by her producer Arthur Hornblow Jr., who was mesmerized by her beauty and eyes, which, according to him, were calm and clear like a blue lake. To be fair, he wasn't kidding. Her name would eventually become synonymous with glamour and a unique peekaboo hairstyle that not only captivated viewers but also influenced the fashion trends of the time. Remember during World War II, when her form and face graced many airplanes as nose art? We simply do. Say what you will about Miss Lake, but her rise to fame was simply meteoric. She first found success as a teenager with her role in the 1941 military drama I Wanted Wings, and the rest became history. Fun fact, did you know that her signature hairstyle, with one eye covered by cascading waves, became a cultural phenomenon? So much so that during World War II, the US government requested she change it to something more practical for women working in factories. This was because the women who were copying Lake had their eyes blindsided by their hair, which could cause major work hazards. Of course, the ever-gracious Lake obliged and debuted the Victory Roll, a new look that was just as iconic. Who else but Victoria Lake could manage that feat? In any case, Lake's off-screen existence was, to put it mildly, significantly less glamorous. Her personal life was plagued by tragedy, and she was getting a bad reputation behind the scenes as someone who was hard to work with. She also tried to hide the fact that she was 6 months pregnant from director Preston Sturges during the 1941 Sullivan's Travels production. After learning the truth, things got so ugly that Preston needed to be forcibly restrained since he was so furious. For Lake, this encounter was the start of a string of unfortunate events, both personally and professionally. It all began when she gave birth to her second child prematurely in 1943 after tripping over a cable on set, with the kid passing away soon after. Then she got a nasty divorce, which eventually led her down a dark path of booze drinking as a coping mechanism. As the light in her career began to dwindle, Lake faced a staggering pile of harsh publicity and reviews, which made her dependence on alcohol worse. By 1948, Paramount had chosen to not renew her contract, effectively marking the beginning of the end of her Hollywood career. 3 years later, she became broke. Her second husband filed for bankruptcy, and the IRS seized their home for unpaid taxes. As sad as it sounds, Lake's one glittering career dissolved into total obscurity as she drifted between cheap hotels in New York City, taking whatever theater roles she could find. Soon she struggled with mental health issues and even with the law. On multiple occasions, she was arrested for public drunkenness and disorderly conduct. Her reputation was further tarnished by stories of her erratic behavior. As the years went by, her beauty began to wane. She was no longer the beautiful woman who was the object of everyone's attraction. Her teeth rotted out, her peekaboo bang vanished, and her face was bloated from heavy drinking. Even the eyes that made her so appreciative were enveloped in thick bags of skin. In the last years of her life, she attempted to visit her old movie studio, Paramount, but was turned away at the gate by the guard and an even higher up within the studio, claiming to have never heard of her. She finally passed away in 1973 due to acute hepatitis and a kidney injury directly linked to her years of heavy drinking. She was only 50 years old. But that wasn't sad enough. She was set to die alone, estranged from her children. Even the fate of her ashes remains a mystery. Some say they were scattered into the Atlantic Ocean off the coast of Florida, while others claim they ended up in an antique store in upstate New York. Number 13. Rodman Edward Serling. Although Rod Serling was not an actor, it's simply undeniable that his creative roles as a screenwriter and iconic television producer were good enough to mark an era in the industry. Born on Christmas 1924 in Syracuse, New York, to a Jewish family, Rod was the younger of two successful sons. His older brother, Robert J. Serling, became a notable novelist and aviation writer. Contrary to what most fans think, Rod Serling's love for stage performances and storytelling started at a young age. As a schoolboy, his vivid imagination shone like a million stars, and he was involved in lots of the arts. But that's not all. During the dreadful World War II, Serling served as a paratrooper before using the GI Bill to attend Antioch College in Yellow Springs, Ohio, where he studied literature and drama. There he began writing for audio and television, laying the foundation for his future success in the industry. Just like Victoria Lake, Serling's rise to fame in the television industry was meteoric. He became known for his intense, socially conscious scripts that tackled issues like war, racism, and censorship, subjects often considered too controversial for television at the time. Alas, Serling's professional success was mirrored by a lot of personal vices, most especially smoking. And yes, it was so bad that he was rarely seen without a cigarette in hand. According to multiple accounts, he smoked 3 to 4 packs of cigarettes a day, a habit that began during his service in the military and worsened as he dealt with the pressures of the television industry. On May 3, 1975, Serling suffered his first heart attack and was hospitalized for 2 weeks. But despite the advice from his doctors, Serling continued to smoke, and just weeks after being released, he experienced a second heart attack. This time, doctors determined that open-heart surgery was necessary, though the procedure was risky. The 10-hour operation took place on June 26th, but Serling suffered a third heart attack on the operating table and died 2 days later, on the 28th, at the age of 50.
The rich man, John. And I'm his wife.
What are you getting at?
Something could happen. You could make it happen.
Number 12. Barbara Payton. Oh boy, if there's a woman whose life I wish turned out differently, it has to be Barbara Payton. Back in the day, she was a striking blonde beauty with the world at her feet, but her life took a tragic turn that would forever set her in Hollywood's halls of what if. Born in Cloquet, Minnesota in 1927, Payton made her way to Hollywood in the late 1940s, where her look set her on a path to the top. She made her film debut in the 1949 noir thriller Trapped, opposite Lloyd Bridges, and soon appeared alongside some of Hollywood's biggest stars, including James Cagney in the 1950s Kiss Tomorrow Goodbye and Gregory Peck in Only the Valiant only a year later. Modern Hollywood fans may not remember this, but Payton's potential was on a whole different level. She was even compared to the likes of Marilyn Monroe, with some believing she could not only rival Monroe's star power, but even surpass it. But in the end, the young starlet failed to resist the seductive clutches of Hollywood's royalty. She began to party hard and enter scandalous relationships, many of which were rumored to ascend her on the ladder of fame. Worse, she soon found herself in a messy love triangle that grabbed national headlines. At then, it was unspoken of. A woman couldn't play Frank at Tone, a celebrated star in the industry, with B-movie actor Tom Neal. It was the kind of drama that Hollywood resented, and she was right in the middle of it. Things really blew up in 1951 when Neal and Tone got into a brutal fight over Payton, leaving Tone with serious injuries, a concussion, and a fractured cheekbone. The brawl made headlines and shattered Payton's image. She went from being a rising star to someone studios didn't want to touch. The fallout was brutal. Hollywood, always cautious about its stars' personal lives, started avoiding her. By the mid-1950s, her career was in a free fall. To cope, Payton turned to alcohol and heroin, but that only made things worse. Her last movie, Murder Is My Beat, in 1955, marked the end of her film career, and by the following year, she had lost custody of her 9-year-old son. Yep, her life was a mess at that point. All efforts to get back on track failed, and by 1962, she had become a prostitute. She passed away at the age of 39 in 1967 from heart failure, a result of years of substance abuse. But oddly enough, Payton's life and times closely mirror the next name on our list. Can you guess who? Number 11, John Barrymore. Once hailed as one of the greatest actors of his time, Barrymore's story took a heartbreaking turn as his battle with alcoholism began to eclipse his once illustrious career. Born into a renowned family, the Barrymore name was synonymous with acting excellence, and John, along with his siblings Ethel, went on to achieve greatness in the industry in their respective niches. With his matinee idol looks and incredible talent, John Barrymore quickly made a name for himself on the stage before moving to the silver screen, where he's shown in iconic silent films like Sherlock Holmes in 1922. And when the industry began to accept talking pictures, you can bet that Barrymore's theater experience made the switch so seamless. Remember his amazing performances in films like Grand Hotel in 1932 and Dinner at 8 in 1933. Becoming an icon felt like a given. Alas, things don't always work out the way we plan. By the mid-1930s, long-term alcoholism had eaten a big chunk of his career and personal life. Known for his heavy drinking even before his film career, Barrymore's addiction began to affect his professional reputation as he struggled with memory loss and erratic behavior on set. This decline was evident during the production of Counselor at Law, where Barrymore's inability to remember his lines signaled a troubling downturn in his abilities. And guess what? His growing performance issues became so pronounced that he lost a role in the 1934 hit Hat, Coat, and Glove, and missed the opportunity to play Hamlet on film, a role he had famously portrayed on stage with great acclaim. And don't even get me started on his tumultuous personal life. His marriage to actress Dolores Costello deteriorated as his drinking worsened, leading to their divorce in 1935. At the time, his love affair with alcohol became so bad that it led to increasingly erratic behavior and health problems, resulting in hospitalization for a mental breakdown. Down the line, he was chosen as the prime candidate to cast as Mercutio in George Cukor's 1936 production of Romeo and Juliet. But despite the production demanding he remains completely sober during filming, including being confined to a sanitarium between shoots, Barrymore's performance was still poor. His physical and mental states were rapidly declining, and he basically crumbled. By 1938, Barrymore's once bright career had dimmed to the point where he was labeled box office poison by the Independent Theater Owners Association. Finally seeing the resemblance with Barbara Payton? To be fair, Barrymore also made attempts at a comeback in the late 1930s, including roles in True Confession and Marie Antoinette, but again, it just couldn't work. His final years were filled with humiliating performances that mocked the great talent he once had. In May 1942, he died from complications related to cirrhosis of the liver, kidney failure, and pneumonia at the age of 60, complications that eclipsed the greatest career he could have had. Speaking of giants, look who's next.
Look, are you just fiddling around with me or what?
I just want you to feel you're doing well. I hate for people to...
Number 10, Andre the Giant. No matter what era of Hollywood you're familiar with, I'm pretty sure you've heard the name Andrei Rene Roussimoff, or as most of us know him, Andre the Giant. A man whose presence was truly larger than life in every possible way. At a towering 7 feet 4 inches and over 500 pounds, Andre the Giant was often called the eighth wonder of the world. His wrestling career turned him into a global sensation, but it was his role as Fezzik in The Princess Bride that really secured his spot in pop culture history. But behind the scenes, Andre's enormous size, a result of acromegaly, also fueled a legendary appetite for alcohol that became a big part of his persona. It might sound unbelievable, but get this. Andre could down over 100 beers in a single sitting. In fact, he once polished off 119 12-ounce beers in just 6 hours. And that's not all. There were shocking rumors regarding his booze intakes, that he once gobbled a mix of 16 bottles of wine as well as other mixed drinks in one night. On the outside, Andre was a wonderful man, but his vices were eating him on the inside. Apart from alcohol, Andre took nearly 7,000 calories a day, and although I'm no expert, it's easy to imagine how unhealthy that is. By the time he reached his mid-40s, Andre's health had deteriorated badly. His massive size put a huge strain on his heart, eventually leading to congestive heart failure. On January 27, 1993, at just 46 years old, Andre passed away in his sleep in a Paris hotel room. The official cause of death was heart failure, worsened by the effects of diabetes, which had gone on untreated for years. But here's where things get interesting. Did you know that after Andre the Giant died, Paris's top crematorians couldn't handle his large body? You heard that right, his ashes also weighed up to 17 pounds. Bewildering or not, Andre the Giant's life was super complex. Laying everything bare showed the world that living in a giant's body is both a gift and a curse. Number 9. Clark Gable. Coming in next is Clark Gable, the man famously known as the King of Hollywood. Born in 1901 in Ohio, Gable grew up without knowing his mother. No, she wasn't a deadbeat. She sadly passed away when he was a young age. Contrary to what many people think, his early life was far from glamorous. He spent countless hours working at a tire factory before he discovered his passion for acting after watching the play The Bird of Paradise. Even when he turned to Hollywood in search of a better life, success didn't come easy. Battered and beaten, he struggled to get meaningful roles until he met acting coach Josephine Dillon, who helped him refine his image. Like a spark to dry wood, his coach served as a catalyst to his success, which eventually led him to the radar of MGM, who then made him an offer that was too good to refuse. As soon as he signed up, the studio used its power to fast-track him to A-list films that brought him widespread appraisal and placed him at the top of the industry. However, like many actors of his time, Gable couldn't deal with the pressures of his newfound wealth. Despite his public image as a charismatic star, he was a notorious womanizer and struggled with a nasty love for booze. And don't even get me started on his messy, scandalous relationships, including that with actress Loretta Young. You see, the pair actually had a daughter called Judy Lewis together, but Gable preferred that it be kept secret for decades, featuring it would destroy her career. In any case, after the peak of Gable's career came with Gone with the Wind in 1939, the following years were marked by decline. The death of his third wife, Carol Lombard, in a tragic plane crash deeply affected him, and it spiraled from there. Using alcohol as his first line of defense, the King of Hollywood splurged on several bottles per day. It was so bad that everyone knew about his secret and sometimes were wary of his antics. If it hadn't been for MGM, who diligently worked to keep him away from the public eye, who knows what would have happened. Speaking of which, there was a persistent rumor at the time that Clark Gable once killed a pedestrian while driving drunk, and that MGM covered it up by sending another man to jail in his place. This story, however, has been widely debunked as a Hollywood myth. While that chapter has long been closed, it's also worth mentioning that his dark vices deteriorated his health, especially when he got older. By the age of 59, his body was a mockery of what it once was. He looked older than he should have, and his organs were roughed up by the countless bottles and cigars he left in his wake. Number 8. John Wayne. Often hailed as a symbol of American masculinity, John Wayne had a deep connection with alcohol that mirrored his larger-than-life persona. Known for his legendary performances in over 170 films and TV productions, Wayne was a beloved figure both at home and abroad, but his fans might be surprised to learn just how much alcohol was a part of his daily life. To start with, booze was a part of his daily life. Whether he was on a movie set, relaxing on his houseboat, or even having fun with friends, Wayne was unapologetically ferocious in his drinking. And he always had someone close to him. Fun fact, he famously quipped that a man who couldn't drink was never to be trusted. To Wayne, drinking wasn't just a pastime. It was the ultimate way to prove one's masculinity. Any man who couldn't handle his liquor was seen as lacking in Wayne's eyes. But his drinking, however, wasn't without consequences. Directors who were fully aware of his nasty habits tried to crack his code by scheduling scenes long before noon. It was a simple logic. Anything after the sun peaked would be too late, as Wayne would be too intoxicated to coherently move a muscle. And guess what? The stories didn't stop on set. Wayne's son Ethan once waxed lyrical about his father would make regular stops near icebergs while cruising on their 136-foot yacht, just so he could down on tequila and bourbon. And here's where things get interesting. Remember when I told you that Wayne was unapologetic about his lifestyle? Well, it turns out that the man was a selective drinker. In spite of how whiskey is more tailored to the rugged image of men of his caliber, John Wayne hated every bit of it until he died in 1979 after a heartbreaking battle with stomach cancer. Number 7. Bernard Lee. With over 100 film and television credits to his name over the span of 50 years, Bernard Lee is inarguably one of the most iconic Hollywood actors of all time. However, for all of his on-screen success behind the scenes, Mr. Lee's life was marred by personal tragedies that led him down a dark path. Where do we even start? He was viciously mugged, crippled with mounting debts, and like that wasn't already bad enough, he lost his beloved wife in a tragic house fire. The culmination of these 3 events led Lee into a deep depression that he never really recovered from. In his despair, he turned to alcohol as a coping mechanism, but what began as solace quickly spiraled into addiction. Lee's reliance on alcohol became so intense that he would lock himself in his dressing room during filming breaks, resorting to extreme measures to continue drinking even when directors tried to curb his habits. Where do we even start? He once hired someone to feed a straw through the keyhole of his dressing room, allowing him to sip alcohol discreetly. And when that devious plan got unraveled, he kept changing ways to get his daily booze. From starlet to seasoned, rich to poor, every actor in the industry knew about Lee's love for alcohol. And when whispers were rumored to be circulating regarding who was the best in the industry, he challenged fellow actor Richard Burton in a drinking contest, out-drinking his opponent in what must have been the battle for the ages. Yet this victory was hollow, as both men suffered severely due to their excessive consumption. Tragically, Bernard Lee's health got worse as he got older. Like the case of John Wayne, he picked up a nasty case of stomach cancer, which eventually took his life, although at a much older age of 73. At the time of his death, his ailment was widely believed to have been accelerated by his heavy drinking. Looking back, it's heartbreaking to realize that Lee, who once brought so much joy to audiences, fell into the trenches of his vices because of the sad predicaments that befell him. It makes overwhelming sorrows in his life. Perhaps if he had found a different way to cope, he might have lived a longer and happier life. Number 6. Lon Chaney Jr. Are you even a fan of Hollywood if you don't pay respect to Lon Chaney Jr.? We're talking about the beloved horror icon of Hollywood's golden age, who was ironically born into a legacy of terror. His father, Lon Chaney Sr., was a silent screen legend known for his transformative performances in films like The Phantom of the Opera and The Hunchback of Notre Dame. Yet Jr. was able to not only carve out a name for himself in the industry, but also perform just as well as his father in the niche, if not better. Initially discouraged by his father from pursuing a career in acting, Chaney Jr. didn't embrace Hollywood until after his father's death. Once he did, however, he became the face of horror, most notably as the tragic character Larry Talbot in The Wolfman. Praised for his innate ability to invoke both sympathy and fear from his audiences, Chaney Jr. soon became one of the most important figures in the industry, but sadly, he wouldn't be on this list if he lived a morally upright life. Behind the scenes of his shining life, Chaney Jr. battled with a severe case of alcoholism, and he was far worse than his drinking peers. On the Universal lot, he earned the nickname The Monsters alongside Broderick Crawford for their erratic behavior behind the cameras. From being banned from William Randolph Hearst's mansion after trying to get Marion Davies drunk to appear drunk on live TV shows multiple times, Chaney Jr. became the joke of the industry for all the wrong reasons. Soon after, his terrible vice seeped into his personal life, leading to the end of his first marriage with Dorothy, who couldn't endure his never-ending episodes of manic behavior. In a way, Chaney Jr.'s life was almost anticlimactic. Much like the tormented characters he portrayed, the star actor was a man haunted by his own demons, which sadly led to his early demise. As he aged, Chaney Jr.'s health deteriorated significantly due to his drinking. He suffered from liver problems, gout, beriberi, and even had cataract surgery before his death. His overuse of cigarettes and alcohol was directly linked to the heart disease that eventually claimed his life in 1973 at the age of 67. But before we go into the tragic story of the next actor on our list, make sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on post notifications so you won't miss any of our upcoming videos. And while you're at it, can you guess who's next? Here's a hint. He was Richard Burton's well-known drinking buddy. Number 5. Humphrey Bogart. Famously hailed as the greatest male actor in the history of American cinema, the name Humphrey Bogart is one that's synonymous with success. And why wouldn't it be? The man had numerous Academy Award nominations and surreal performances in timeless classics like The Maltese Falcon, Casablanca, The African Queen, and The Treasure of the Sierra Madre. With his filmography, it's easy to see why he became the leading man in Hollywood and one of the most sought-after bachelors in the industry. Just take a look at this.
What are you, a prize fighter?
No, I'm a shamus.
What's a shaman?
It's a private detective.
You're making fun of me.
Uh-huh.
However, with his infamous drinking habits, Bogart personified the saying that, indeed, no one's perfect. He was known to indulge in a wide array of alcoholic beverages, including scotch, gin martinis, and even the occasional Jack Rosé cocktail. At first, seeing Bogart with a drink in his hand was rather cute. It added to his tough guy appeal and basically became his calling card, until it eventually spiraled out of control. At some point, his name was always in the tabloids due to public outbursts and bar brawls. He was even banned from many highbrow establishments. Public outbursts and bar brawls became common, leading to his being banned from several establishments. And just like that, the affable, charismatic man Hollywood once knew would transform into a brooding, angry figure, eerily similar to the hard-edged characters he portrayed on screen. As his drinking worsened, it began to take a toll on his career. Bogart often showed up on set intoxicated or hungover, making it difficult for directors and co-stars to work with him. His erratic behavior severed many relationships, including that with Mary Astor, who remarked that he always seemed angry with the world. Despite the fans' concerns, Bogart was never able to change his ways. He kept on drinking and smoking cigars until his health could no longer keep up. In 1956, he was diagnosed with esophageal cancer, a condition that was unavoidably linked to his years of alcohol and tobacco abuse. Despite treatment and even going under the knife, he lost the battle with cancer a year later at the age of 57. Ladies, you might want to look away for this one. Number 4. Jan Michael Vincent. Jan Michael Vincent had everything: good looks, charm, and a skyrocketing career that most actors could only dream of. At his peak, he was the highest paid actor on American television, raking in over $200,000 per episode for his role in Airwolf during the mid-1980s. Can you imagine how crazy that is? That's over $760,000 in today's economy, adjusted for inflation. This success came on the heels of his impressive performances in films like The Mechanic alongside Charles Bronson and Hooper, where he played a charismatic young stuntman. However, with fame came temptation, and Vincent's life began to unravel. Enter the late 1970s, and Vincent was a shadow of his former self. Plunging headfirst into the dark path he trod, he earned a harrowing reputation for being a rebel and a drug taker. He was even arrested for possessing cocaine. Did his growing infamy get better? Certainly not. After starring in Airwolf, his trajectory went so down that he never recovered. His substance abuse got in the way of his work, leading to damaging on-set behavior and violent altercations with the cast and crew, and even in bars. Not even his then-fiancée could escape the consequences of his vices. She broke off the engagement when she had had enough. In 1996, he drove under the influence and crashed his car, resulting in severe damage to his vocal cords, which permanently rasped his voice. The accident also injured a female domestic worker. Despite facing legal consequences, including DUI charges and probation violations, Vincent struggled to overcome his addictions. In 2000, he violated his probation by appearing drunk in public and assaulting his fiancée, further cementing his fall from grace. By the time he passed away in 2019 at the age of 74 due to cardiac arrest, his right leg had been partially amputated due to complications from peripheral artery disease, and he was also broke. He even owed up to $70,000 in unpaid back taxes at one point. But if you think that was sad, you might want to brace yourself because more heartbreak is on the way.
That way. And ever since I met her, I'm a-singing in the saddle. Skedaddle-doodle-daddle all.
Number 3. Errol Flynn. Born in Tasmania in 1909, Errol Flynn became an iconic figure in Hollywood, known for his swashbuckling roles and devil-may-care attitude. Unlike many of the stars we've talked about so far, Flynn's entrance into Hollywood came naturally, perhaps even too easily. Once in Hollywood, he didn't have to wait long for his big break. In 1935, he was cast as the lead in Captain Blood, the tale of an 18th century Irish doctor forced to become a pirate. On screen, Flynn was the perfect piece of masculinity. From his looks to his voice and his timeless appeal, Errol Flynn tickled the fancy of women both far and beyond. But off-screen, his life was a whirlwind of excess, scandal, and addiction. If you think his acting roles were legendary, just wait until I fill you in on his penchant for alcohol. From injecting vodka into oranges on set to splurging on some of the most expensive alcohol brands around the globe, Flynn was always in pursuit of pleasure, leaving a trail of chaos in his wake. Dissolute and despondent, he relied more and more on alcohol, and he wasn't just drinking. The actor, who had long experimented with drugs, was developing an addiction to morphine. Flynn's indulgent lifestyle included wild parties on his private boat, where alcohol, sex, and cocaine flowed freely. He was so addicted to alcohol that he had several bottles of vodka every day, and his antics were the stuff of legend, like the time he was arrested for drunkenly stealing a cop's badge. Even though his charisma remained, Flynn's body began to suffer the consequences of his excesses. Apart from being out of shape, Flynn was bloated and morally decadent. In his 30s, his heart and lungs were already damaged, and his once athletic physique became bloated and unhealthy. As he once said, "I like my whiskey old and my women young," and in later years of his life, Flynn became heavily dependent on vodka, reportedly drinking over a bottle a day, which took a severe toll on his liver. When he was banned from drinking on set, he resorted to injecting vodka into his oranges. In 1959, at the age of 50, Flynn suffered a fatal heart attack. But while that should have been the end of his story, the thespian left the stage with a shocking cliffhanger. The medics who performed his autopsy confessed that his body, especially his liver, was so ravaged by his vices that they were surprised he even died at his age. It should have happened sooner. Number 2, Peter O'Toole. Say what you want about Peter O'Toole, but the man was a pure entertainer. We all fondly remember his first appearance on Johnny Carson's show, which became the stuff of legend when he showed up so intoxicated that he barely lasted a few minutes before breaking his glasses and fleeing the stage. Hysterical. Despite his eccentric behavior, O'Toole's talent was undeniable, earning him a staggering 8 Academy Award nominations for films like Lawrence of Arabia and Beckett. But here's the thing, unlike many who struggle with alcoholism, O'Toole had no childhood trauma or devastating events pushing him toward the bottle. He simply enjoyed drinking, especially when it was in the company of friends. One of them in particular was Richard Harris, who together with O'Toole created a group called Alcoholics Unanimous for the like-minded individuals who relished the camaraderie of a shared drink. There, they would cause chaos in pubs and upscale establishments and even urinate on stage during performances. But perhaps 2 of his most legendary drink stories were when he claimed to have learned about JFK's assassination 22 years after it happened, and secondly, when he suffered a terrifying burn on his index finger without knowing how it even happened. Alcohol wasn't just an escape, it was a way of life for him, but alas, this lifestyle came with a price. By the late 1970s, O'Toole's drinking had severely eroded his stomach lining. After undergoing multiple surgeries, his doctor warned him that another drink could be fatal. O'Toole gave up alcohol for a decade, but eventually picked up another habit, growing marijuana in his garden. Despite the health warnings and years of excessive drinking, O'Toole lived to be 81, passing away in 2013. By then, he was back to enjoying his daily booze, closing the chapter on one of Hollywood's most enigmatic and talented figures. Number 1, Oliver Reed. When it comes to Hollywood's most notorious drinkers, Peter O'Toole might be remembered for his wild antics and legendary drinking stories, but even his exploits pale in comparison to the man who tops our list, Oliver Reed. I mean, sure, both men were charismatic, larger-than-life figures who had a deep love for their craft and an even deeper love for their booze. But while O'Toole managed to live to the ripe old age of 81 despite his wild lifestyle, Reed's story ended in tragic irony. He was born into wealth and raised in comfort in southwest London in 1938. But despite his aristocratic upbringing, Reed was no delicate flower. He grew up big, strong, and wild, often using his size and strength to his advantage. Reed's acting career was impressive. He starred in many notable films and quickly became known for his larger-than-life personality both on and off the screen. But Reed didn't just drink. He drank with purpose, almost as if it were an Olympic sport. One night, Reed and his friends reportedly consumed 60 gallons of beer, 32 bottles of scotch, 17 bottles of gin, 4 crates of wine, and a bottle of baby cham. He even claimed to concoct his own drink called gunk, and drank 106 pints of beer on a 2-day marathon binge before walking Josephine Burge down the aisle. Fast forward to 1987, and Reed became severely overweight. He also suffered from gout and had severe kidney issues that practically forced him into sobriety. It didn't last, though. After a year, he picked up alcohol again, this time with a fiery vengeance. While filming Rennie Harlan's Cutthroat Island in 1995, Reed was cast in a cameo role as Mordecai Fingers. However, he arrived on set heavily intoxicated, having been involved in a bar fight earlier. He then attempted to expose himself to lead actress Geena Davis, resulting in his dismissal from the film. Reed featured in a couple of uneventful films in the 1990s before Ridley Scott gave him a leading role in Gladiator. He maintained sobriety while filming in Malta in 1999 until an unfortunate encounter that would kill him. After encountering a group of Royal Navy cadets in a pub, Reed accepted their challenge to a drinking and arm wrestling competition. It was a battle he would not survive. Reed collapsed before he could finish his drink and died on the way to the hospital at the age of 61. Oddly enough, Reed always said that the best people you'd meet in life were always in pubs. Perhaps he was wrong. Much like the others on our list, I can't help but feel that the allure of alcohol eventually eclipsed his career. It's a wild, painful reminder of the tragic consequences of living life on the edge. And with that, we conclude our journey through the lives of Hollywood's most infamous vices. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe, and check out the next video currently on your screen. It's one you can't afford to miss.